to our conversation, coming together and sharing our stories as a kickoff event for the AAPI month in May. I know it's listed as AAPI, but Dr. Perez and I want to include our international students from Asian countries as well. We have many, so we want to welcome them and include them in this communication as well. So it is my pleasure to introduce the panelists to you, to our audience. Nicholas Lai, can you wave to the audience? Hi, Nicholas.
Hey, everyone.
Nicholas is one of our international students from Malaysia and currently studying in the PhD program of business psychology at TCSPP at Chicago campus. Lucette Marin is a Southeast Asian and Pacific Islander. That's how she identifies herself, and also studying at Chicago campus for her master's degree in counseling. Luna Lu, I also know her as Xiaoyan, is another international student from China studying inside the of applied clinical psychology at our Anham campus in TCSPP. So lastly, I'm going to introduce Dr. Perez to you. Patricia Perez is an associate professor of the International Psychology Department, online campus. Dr. Perez has been, I call her activist and advocate for international education, and has led both study abroad and field experience programs to Ghana, Philippines, Kuwait, and visited Indonesia, UK, and Egypt, and maybe more. I cannot remember anymore, for internationalization grant projects. So Dr. Perez, would you please start to let the group know why and what the purpose of this conversation and why we want to start in a conversation style like this. Thank you so much, Dr. Perez.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I'm so thrilled. Thank you everyone for joining and supporting and listening and being here today. And I'm just going to make my remarks very brief. We have our Rockstar students, speakers for today, and panelists. And the purpose really for us gathering together here is to continue, not really start, but continue conversations through storytelling. In many parts of the world, storytelling is something that we learn lessons from, we learn about each other, and within similarities and differences across Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, as you've heard of our panelists today, we will be learning with Cindy guiding us with questions, learning from them as far as their lived experience and their narrative, which we can't take away. So this is part of our strategy to really, for us to present in this format. And we also encourage you to share your stories or share your stories of individuals you know who are part of our communities in the chat box. We'd like this to be a little bit engaging as well. And we are going to leave some time for question and answer. But my role really is to support a faculty lens and also to guide the conversation potentially, and then also manage the chat box. So welcome everyone. And I'm also here to support Cindy as well. And just thank you so much for the faculty, leadership of TCSPP who are here, friends, family, students. It's just so wonderful for all of us to be hopefully here in a safe space.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perez, and I will monitor the chat box as well. Thank you for all the support. So I will now just ask the panelists to share their background and heritage with you, or the background that they're familiar with. So my first question for the panelists is, what is your Asian background and heritage? I know I introduced very briefly, but give us a little bit more. And also what, if you're familiar with any Asian background and heritage. So Dr. Perez, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, so we originally said just jump in, but maybe I'll just prompt. So Lucette, would you like to start us off with answering that question so we can get to know you a little better?
Sure, and thank you, Cindy and Dr. Perez, for the introduction. Well, as Cindy said, I identify as Southeast Asian American, currently exploring identities of Pacific Islander and Hispanic or Spanish influence. It's a lot, but it does tell you a little bit about being, Filipinx, being part of the community has had just a long history of colonizations, cultural influences, the Philippines was colonized by Spain for 400 years. And because of that, my maiden name is actually Martinez, which is Spanish influenced. At the same time, my family is from Atimon and Quezon, Philippines. And geographically, that is, it's northeast of the country and the island of Luzon. But the country itself, it is located southeast, closer to the sea. And so as you can see, some Filipinos have fair skin and some Filipinos have brown skin like myself, where I can identify as more of Pacific Islander because I do have family who live on Pacific Islands close to the country as well. And so, yes, I identify as Filipino American.
Thank you. And who wants to go next? Nicholas?
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks. So, Cindy, and Dr. Perez, your question about heritage and background. My name is Nicholas Lai. I'm an international student from Malaysia, as Cindy has introduced. I have been in the United States for the last 8 years now and going. I came here back in 2013 to basically start my time here in the United States as a student in the bachelor's program in the University of Minnesota. And after graduating, I came to TCSPP for my master's and eventually returned back here again for my PhD. In terms of my cultural background, I'm actually Malaysian Chinese. Specifically, I'm actually fourth generation Malaysian Chinese. My family's been in Malaysia for 4 generations now, so I'm the 4th generation there. Much like Lucetta's story as well, I really very much the story of colonization as well, and I'm also a product of that as well because Malaysia was part of the British Empire long way back then. I mean, pretty much half the world was part of the British Empire at some point, And because of that, a lot of immigrants from across the British colonies came to Malaysia, and my family was a part of that group as well. And because of that, I identify mainly with with the Asian label, and that's who I really am. In terms of my background and the language that I speak Malay, I speak Mandarin, Cantonese, and English. So, but these days it's mainly just English. I'm not really so fluent with my Mandarin anymore as I used to be, but I still try to keep in touch with that. So that's my cultural background, mainly Chinese. And I also identify very closely with my Malaysian heritage and traditions as well. But that's perhaps a conversation we can have later as well.
Definitely. Thank you, Nicholas. Everyone, you are very welcome. I know you have your own heritage and background as well, and the way that you identify yourself. So feel free to put in the chat box so we can all learn more about each other. So next, Luna, Xiaoyan, whichever you prefer, go ahead.
All right, so thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Dr. Perez, and thank you all my fellow panelists. I love to, I'm honored to be here at this opportunity and to speak to you all. So in terms of my cultural heritage, I would probably identify myself as Chinese, the Chinese American or Asian American in general. So I was born and grew up in Shanghai, and I moved to this country actually 9 years ago. So my experience is a little bit similar to Nicholas from that perspective. But I moved here. I first actually had my master's degree with the Chicago School, and then I come back for the PsyD program. So in terms of my Chinese heritage and background, so I did 23andMe. I was hoping I can get a slightly different spice in my gene, but I use a but here, but the funny thing is actually I got 99.8% Chinese. So I'm like pretty pure, a lot less diverse in terms of genetic speaking. So I'm really high genetically speaking in the Chinese part. The part of China I'm from is Shanghai. For some of you who don't know, Shanghai is probably one of the biggest metropolitan cities, not only in China, but probably also in Asia as well. So Shanghai operates in the way that because it's metropolitan background, so it's a really diverse place. So that's why I would say I grew up in a very diverse background. And my dad's side of the family actually is originally from the north part of China. And my mom's side of the family is actually also close to Shanghai, but not really from Shanghai. But both my dad and mom, actually, they're born in Shanghai already. So to some extent, Shanghai being a big metropolitan city is also kind of like an immigrant, high-end immigrant from different parts of China. While I was born and grew up in Shanghai, I do see the cultural heritage from both sides of my parents' family from different sections of China. Because China being so big, there are so many different subculture and different sections of China.
Does she freeze or is that just
Yes,
maybe-
I think she's frozen a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, there she is. There she
Okay,
is.
Oh.
here you come back. It just froze a little bit. It just maybe repeated the last part, last sentence or something that you just said. We didn't hear anything.
Where did you guys miss out? Sorry.
Maybe just the last sentence, probably.
Oh, no, well, I say just, the diversity part of different little sections of China.
Mhm.
So, but overall, like being a Chinese, a Chinese American, that's what I identify with.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Perez, do you want to identify yourself?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So I identify as Filipina and also Filipina American. But if I was going to say just a general description, it would be Asian. I think I identify more as Asian as opposed to Asian American right now.
Thank you so much. And thank you for letting us know who you are and your culture and heritage. So my second question will come to what have you learned about this Asian background or heritage? In another word, I want to say like how you recognize the beauty of your own background, the side that really make you grow, and especially when you live in a different context. And maybe Dr. Perez, this time you want to start first?
What have I learned?
What do you
my
have
goodness.
learned? Yeah, and how you recognize the beautiful side of your background.
Well, I think that what I've learned is that many people don't know where the Philippines is. I think, as a child, many people really growing up either felt like I was Chinese or Japanese because those were the dominant cultures or communities, I think, that people understood potentially the two powerhouses, as it will, that people understand of Asians. I mean, they didn't even include India or anything like that, but that's where I was living at the time, would say, oh, then you're either Chinese or Japanese. So that's what I learned about myself really early on. And then I had to actually learn about that, moving in all these different places, about where the Philippines is on the map, trying to educate people about where the Philippines is on the map, and then trying to explain to them, yes, we're all part of Asia or Southeast Asia, but we have differences. There are differences. And what I've learned that I think is really beautiful, which Riley is my daughter who's here, and she will definitely say this, which is also very similar, is our foods. Like I cook several dishes that are very, very much part of who I am. It's comforting to me to see people who look like me and know what I'm trying to say, coming from a very collectivistic society that really honors the group as opposed to the individual. And I think people who come from very individualistic societies and communities don't understand that as well, that we do things for the group and we don't also like to shame people in front of others. These were I don't know if it's a beautiful thing or whether it's but these are the things that
I think it is.
make me feel very much a part of that culture. I make my own mistakes, sometimes switching between individualistic societies and collectivistic societies as I navigate things here in the United States. My colleagues will know this about me. But in the end, those are the type of things that come very natural to me. And so when it comes natural to me like that, I know that I'm hopefully part of the insider of an Asian community or Asian American community.
Thank you so much. That's so true. That I think that a lot of us share some of the similarity. Like we are very, like in China, I think that Luna can verify that we are so group oriented. And
yes.
Even now, I still have a difficult time to say my office and this is my responsibility. This is my office. This is my, and I use I like to use we or us or our. Yeah, I'm still learning. Sometimes force myself to change my sentence when I email every day. So it's really interesting that we share some of the similarities. And who wants to be next? Nicholas, do you want to be the next?
Sure, I'd love to. So to your question, Cindy, what is the beauty of my background? And I think much like Dr. Perez talking about how multicultural it is, I think for me being Malaysian Chinese or Chinese Malaysian, the beauty is really just how non-monolithic our cultures are. Because I think oftentimes, when you think about the Asian diaspora, it's easy just to basically look at it as just one big monolithic group. And I think what really makes the background of my, at least being Malaysian Chinese really awesome is that it's really multicultural, and we are really the product of, a whole hodgepodge of different cultures put into one country together. And just for context, Malaysia is a Muslim country, but because of our colonial roots, we have a lot of Chinese and Indians in Malaysia as well. And the beauty of that really is that in Malaysia, at least, we celebrate all the three major ethnic groups holidays. So for example, like Deepavali is a traditional Tamil holiday, but it's actually a national holiday in Malaysia. So, I don't celebrate because I'm not Hindu, but because it's a national holiday and it's such a widely celebrated holiday back home, we're all exposed to it, regardless of whether you're Hindu or not. And I think that really is the beauty of the background of where I'm from, is that I really get to appreciate the cultures and learn so much from it. And coming here to the United States, I think one of the things I really look back upon and realize is how much I took all that for granted sometimes, like being able to just say, yeah, I celebrate, my friends' holidays, and, it's not necessarily a holiday I celebrate. For example, like Thaipusam is another holiday that's very widely celebrated in Malaysia as well. But, people here may not necessarily know about it. And I took it for granted that, people would just know about all the ethnic holidays here. But having been here for the last 8 years, I can tell that, people don't necessarily aren't aware of, like, for example, Lunar New Year is a big one here for me, at least, but a lot of people are still in the dark about that. They're like, Lunar New Year, what is that, So I kind of took it for granted. But the beauty is that I really feel much more, what's the word here? I feel a lot more enlightened, if that's the right word here, that I'm able to be exposed to all these different cultures and interact and understand people at a deeper level. And because of that, it's really helped my time just, go about, meeting new people. And that's really the beauty of it, I'd say.
Thank you so much. I didn't know that you in Malaysia to celebrate so many holidays for different ethnic groups.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, we have way too many holidays. It's not very good for productivity, but it's good for people who want to find an excuse to take some time off work.
Yeah, I learned something new too. So thank you, Bliss, for
definitely,
sharing all of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly. We have like a 56 ethnic groups in China, in mainland China, and we don't have that many official holidays, but yeah, definitely like we recognize every single one of them. And a lot of times the government has some special benefits or special policies for ethnic groups to make sure that they grow, they don't disappear or something. So Luna can tell more about that. Luna, do you want to talk next?
Yeah, sure. Piggyback on what Nicholas and Cindy were saying. There are definitely, a lot of different holidays and traditions we celebrate, because China also have a relatively, extended history going on thousands of years. So we do have a lot of different cultural background and like histories and a lot of different things going on. And even I noticed that we have a lot of like slang and idioms and saying a lot of things. And sometimes when in my clinical work with my client, which a lot of them, they're not from Asian countries at all, right? And I'm trying to reference to those like kind of like culture saying, but I try to translate them. And then after my translation, I always ask them, do you guys have something similar like this in English? They look at me, they're like, probably not, but we like what you say. It makes sense. So this is how I realized, going back to, what I learned, what is the beauty about it? This is when I realized, an extensive amount of history in the Chinese culture give us a lot more extensive amount of language and the way we describe things. And I think it's definitely one of the beauty I learned from my culture, in the way that, especially coming from, I'm going back to like Shanghai, in the way that being a metropolitan city, being a place that's, relatively really diverse in terms of absorbing different culture, because it's also a coastal city. So we do have different opportunities to get exposed to different kind of cultures and things going on, not only in China, but also just within this whole world. So being open-minded to different things is definitely something I learned even back in China, that, ethnic speaking, racial speaking, we might not have that many diversity going on, but culturally speaking, different values, that's definitely something I got exposed growing up in Shanghai that give me that opportunity. And the other hand of it is also, being open-minded and being different things that expose to you also give you the opportunity to be very adaptive. So I think that's also one of the strengths and qualities that I can take. And 9 years ago when I moved to this country, it's like, my ability of being adaptive definitely helped me a lot of getting into this new culture and trying to get used to a lot of different new things. And the other quality I think I want to highlight here is also being in, like, growing up in Shanghai. I think this is also the area that we really value, as much as we value the collectivism and the family value and group value, we also really value being independent. Like the family background I grew up with, like, all the women work. We don't really have a lot of homemakers, like female homemakers at home. All the women work. So when I moved here, a lot of my classmates, they're like, yeah, we just like stay at home and we have nothing to do. That's why we came to graduate school. I was like, what? I can't. There was a hard cultural shock back there. I was like, what do you mean you don't work? So I think that's also the thing that's really interesting to me, because like even as traditional as a lot of culture can be, it's still like, the independency still installed strong in me. And it's not conflict with the collectivism. It's not conflict with the group value or the harmony that we value, but it's also a very interesting balance we're trying to, seek in this journey as well. And I think it definitely is very beneficial for me to move to this new country and get used to the new lifestyle here.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because I'm not from Shanghai, so a lot of things like Luna talked about might be a little bit different from where I am from, because I came from the north, and it's a little bit more conservative, less open, or I should say open later. Not until like 30 years ago, like a more open like Shanghai. So it's more like people's ideas and the concepts are a little bit more conservative. Right now they have changed a lot. Again, like I had a hard time to catch up, but but definitely it's very, very different. And in Shanghai, we had a study abroad program there, and students are really eye-opening. Before they went there, they kind of like, Cindy, do I need to bring a bottle of water? Can I brush my teeth from the running water? And then after they come back, they were like, Cindy, it's just, I'm in the middle of Manhattan. I was like, I told you. So it's a little, really, really a different city. When we're from different city, we have a different, really have a different cultural background, and sometimes it's talk a lot difference. Yeah. And Lucette, we're not forgetting about you. Go ahead to share with us about your, the beauty of your background. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do think that there's a lot I could say, but to kind of understand my identity as Filipino American with multiple identities, I've kind of reflected a little bit for each. But overall, I would say I appreciate the beauty of my heritage, as Dr. Perez said, as one with community, as well as hospitality. Yeah, that I take pride in, but also feel a need in it. And so an example of how I see the beauty of my heritage is through a fiesta. And so for the Philippines, it's predominantly Catholic, but Filipino Catholic is different from American Catholic slightly, because each town celebrates an annual fiesta to honor its saint's feast day. So on this, Filipinos go to mass, townspeople welcome one another into their homes to eat, and gathered at the church or one's balcony, townspeople observe marching bands, dancers, and sponsors with a reina, and the reina embodies and town saint. So throughout the day, there are festivities from fashion shows to basketball, which are held in scattered town. And like I said before, Atimonan is located along the sea, where we have the port. And so when I went to the Philippines a few years ago, I was actually able to go to a fiesta where I observed like colorful costumes and indigenous dances performed by students, elementary students and high school students at competing schools. So overall, a fiesta is meant to be a joyous time with the family. And so I was also able to go to the Philippines in 2019. And there, I was really able to immerse myself in the culture for a month. And what I observed was, despite its modern urbanization, the majority still live in poverty, which imply lack of medical equipment, stable housing, and job opportunity. And this was evident by shacks and huts as impoverished housing and local businesses, mostly in the provinces or villages, and some in the city. So what I observed was Filipinos value education as a means out of poverty. So this can be seen, as you walk or drive along the path, you see portraits of graduates proudly hung on windows of homes. And so Filipinos pursue medical related careers such as nursing in order to work abroad and sustain income for the family. Otherwise, the focus is on survival by maintaining necessities such as food and shelter. So there is a lack of focus, understanding, and progression toward mental health, along with the stigma of mental illness in these collectivistic cultures. Um, and so not only are medical doctors overworked, but also obtain little to no referrals from mental health providers. And yet mental health treatment prevents symptoms and hospitalizations. And so, yes, I do feel a sense of pride in my heritage. I also feel a sense of need to really help my community. And because I've focused on, my Filipina identity, I'm also Filipino American because I grew up and I was raised in an immigrant family background. And so I do want to talk a little bit about that and being bicultural because I did struggle with a sense of belonging. Filipinos' perception of Filipino Americans can be misinterpreted as living a comfortable life. And although this may be true, America was founded on racism. Filipino Americans live in an oppressive system with internalized racism such as third-class citizen or Oriental, where systemically, Asian Americans are people of color as part of a minority group, often ostracized as foreign or exotic. But when I do go to the Philippines, I still feel like I don't fully belong because I didn't grow up there with the context and slang, even though I can speak Tagalog. And so, just kind of understanding these dynamics can really play into one's culture. And although I am speaking on behalf of Filipino American, I can't speak on behalf of the entire group as far as these are my personal experiences, but there are cultural influences that influence this. And so the reason why I say Pacific Islander is because I have family who live in the Marshall Islands, and inspired by that, I reflected on Pacific Islanders, and oftentimes they're often not represented in research, theory, or practice as much. And Pacific Islanders are distinct groups from Asians or Asian Americans. And so thinking about the Marshall Islands, people often travel to Pacific Islands to take vacations and such, but there are people with cultures and traditions and rituals. And currently, because of rising sea levels and climate change, environmental threats could drown civilization on Pacific Islanders. And so that could erase history and culture and values over generations. And so I feel like this isn't often recognized in mainstream media. And I think it's important to bring up because there's a lot of diversity of within group differences and culture with both Asians and Pacific Islanders. And so, yeah.
Of course, thank you so much. And actually, Lucette, you're talking about some community needs, from us, and maybe that's just a good time to talk about, to bring up my third question to the panel and see who wants to take the lead. Given these lessons or heritage, beauty of your heritage and where you grow, what do you think you can do to support these Asian communities? Or maybe you have done something already that you want to tell people, or what do you plan to do to support this Asian community?
Cindy, I just wanted to respond to Lucetta's just comments, and then
Oh, okay,
I don't
go
know, maybe
ahead.
I'll just quickly go into
Then quickly go in.
yeah, quick, and then because I
ahead.
really
Yeah, please.
want to give the mic or give that platform for
Sure.
our student speakers. But so, you know, in complete transparency, many of my students here on the call, and obviously Riley knows this, but much of the reason why I do the work that I do is because of the acculturation process that my parents went through as they came here to the United States. They're coming to America story, and us living all around the world, and how it was hard to adjust to those dominant group expectations, and how to navigate all of that. And so I think that all the things that you were talking about, and there's some of my doctoral students who are here who've been to the Philippines. So all the things that you've talked about for our field experience, which is like a study abroad, which is required in our department, that many of the things that you talk about, like impact of colonization, very much top down, even Catholicism, and how the Spaniards gave us that, and we had our own indigenous spirituality. All of the things that you talk about is also part of our historical trauma. And so to think about this, especially from an advocacy or an activist point of view, or someone to support and be an agent of change, I would say to tell everybody in support of mental health is really to understand the context, to really understand the history and those patterns of history, and knowing that there are within group differences. So one Filipina may not be the same as another Filipina, someone from China, someone from Shanghai, right, or Malaysia. We're not the same. And usually in my own, when I used to have a psychotherapy practice, I would ask my clients, tell me about yourself. And they're like, oh no, Dr. Perez, why do I need to tell you? I'm also identify as Filipino American or Filipina. I go, no, but I want to honor your story. I want to hear from you and not make assumptions or be biased necessarily of what that means. And so that, I know there's much more to do as you are in all of your programs, but that's typically the lens that I bring as a starting point for conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perez. Do you want to continue to let us know, like, what do you do to support the community and what you have done? I know you have done a lot
there's
of
so many
work,
things that I do.
Yeah, I only give you 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying I support, because I'm core faculty in international psychology. Our mission and vision is to support human rights. Human rights, inequalities, really for all communities and everyone in the world. I mean, obviously, I'm not an expert of everybody and everything, but the communities that I support, so it's really in voice. So again, within Asian communities, I think the voice is very different and can be, I think that's also, you know, when you see the media and a lot of things that are going on, it's like, well, why aren't the Asian American, you know, standing up and fighting and doing all these things right from really when much of this started, although none of this is new. Many of us have already experienced a lot of these inequalities, racism, you know, stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination. But now, because of the current climate, COVID-19 pandemic, all of that, pointing fingers and blaming. For me, what I do for communities, especially the ones who ask, and for those that I have good relationships with, and also students, to really give them a platform for voice, to really move towards equality. Because as we know, people of color and our groups are considered people of color, as Lucette mentioned, that there needs to be some address for those inequities. So that's in general. Many of my students will know how I do that within the department and within just other things that I do, but it's really supporting the community so that they get their voices heard and they have places very much similar to this where they can, we can learn from each other.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so important that for all the communities, color or not, to like really stand in solidarity. And that's why we hold this conversation, and we ask everyone to share your background, your heritage with us, to get to know each other. So that's how like we build some kind of a mutual understanding. We all have difference, and then we come to a common ground to stand in solidarity. And because I always believe that none of us can do it, can accomplish this by doing this alone. And yesterday's verdict of the murder is really a victory of every community, not only Black community, but every community. Yeah, I really believe that. So, okay, so we're going to listen to maybe Nicholas, you want to take next to let us know what do you think that you have done? I mean, what you have done to support the community with your cultural heritage, and also, or what you plan to do. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Cindy. So that's hearing everybody's story is really amazing. And I think, we all have our own individual stories to tell. And it's great to hear that, everyone's so, just so psyched up to actually go out there to actually empower our own communities. But honestly, to your point, Cindy, you make a very good statement about solidarity. And I think when I think about what I have done to support my own Asian communities, I think of it more as like supporting the communities I'm currently in, really, because I want to support, the community as a whole, as a large. And one of the things that, given my background in business psychology, I think where my skills are best utilized is in the field of helping people, empower them through career building. And one of the things that I actually really sought to do during my time in internship was to actually go out to our local communities, because I used to intern for a staffing agency, and one of the outreach programs we had was basically go back to communities that were in need of resources and stuff to help them basically develop means to actually build their resumes, give them job coaching skills, etc., to help them get ready for the workplace. And that was one of the things that I really was a big advocate for, because during my time there, I was actually one of the lead project managers or leads for this particular outreach project, where we actually reached out back to our community. And given my background as an Asian person, I felt like my skills were best employed in the field where I would interact more with people who actually who had more familiar background, so I could actually interact with them and they would have that familiarity with me. But in the whole, I think back to what I said, it's more about the community, and the people that I interacted with weren't just necessarily from an Asian background. They were from all kinds of backgrounds. They were all usually from underprivileged backgrounds, where people who were forgotten, people who just did not have the resources around them to actually get that step ahead in life where more privileged people had. So what I did was, in terms of giving back to community, was actually putting back hours into actually giving people interview skills, helping them dress for the job, helping them just really understand, like, okay, this is what you should do in a resume, how you should handle these questions, how you should present yourself, and things like that. And really just kind of provide them the kind of like help that they need and confidence that you are a worthy individual, you are a worthy person, member of this community too, like you may not feel like you're all the way there yet, but I can assure you that, you are that person, and I want to be there to actually help support that. And that was really what I've done in the past, but moving forward in the future, to that, I think what I'd really like to do is I think I'd like to actually spend some time working with Southeast Asian groups, because from my understanding, I think the Southeast Asian diaspora here in the United States is a group that really gets looked over, because the conversation mainly is dominated very much with the East Asian group. When we think about Asians, we mainly only think about really 3 big groups, right? But there's a lot of other small minorities out there amongst the Southeast Asian diaspora that gets forgotten about. And during my time in Minnesota, where I studied there, one particular group stood out to me. Hmong Americans. Hmong Americans are really a very small minority group that really have a really strong presence in Minnesota, particularly. And during my time in Minnesota, what I noticed there was that, a lot of times, like when we talk about statistics, we look over that, we just say, oh, Asians are doing really well in school. They're overachievers in academics. But when you look at the data with Southeast Asians in particular, they're nowhere near that at all, and they're really forgotten. So in the future, that's really what I'd like to do. I'd like to actually see if I can actually tap into my culture background as Southeast Asian to actually reach back out to Southeast Asian communities to really help out in that area.
That's great, wonderful. Like contribute back to the community you have grown up with. Yeah, that's great. Luna, do you want to talk a little bit more about your support you have done?
Yeah, sure. I want to piggyback on what Lisette and also Dr. Perez was saying earlier about the stigma around mental health in general. I think this is a problem or concern not only just within specific subcategory in the Asian community. It's in a lot of Asian communities, and even like in other communities, like in the Hispanic community, the Latino community, in the Black community. The stigma around mental health is definitely one of the bigger things. And from my perspective, I think there are two aspects I'm tapping into how I support. One is within the Asian community in the way that, I feel like working as a therapist myself, I used to do a lot of community work, just to trying to bring the language and the awareness, the knowledge to the people. And a lot of the people, especially I think here in LA area, there are really significant amount of the Chinese American here. They're probably monolingual, which means they probably only speak their home language, either Cantonese or Mandarin. They maybe speak a tiny little bit of English, but that level of English literacy is not enough for them to express their mental health concern, or even getting the help that it deserves. So I think bring that culturally aware and linguistically sensitive information to them is one first step to get them to know, oh, so if I'm having headache, if I'm having stomach ache, that doesn't mean that it's just a headache or stomach ache. That might be my depression, or that might be the anxiety. And also to take away that stigma is to let them know that it actually happens to a lot of people. It's not, I remember a couple of years ago when I was working in the community with a lot of students. So when the parents need to come inside a treatment consent, the agency has the translated version, the Chinese version of the consent already. But on the consent, they translate the word mental health almost into like the term into a little bit like psychotic. So the parents look at the consent, they're like, my kid is not crazy. Why are you asking me to sign this consent? And I have to explain to the parent, I was like, this is kind of like lost in translation. In English, it means mental health. It's a bigger umbrella. If we're going to look at your kid, it's actually just, the behavior issues that your kids are having at school. So we really need to work into the languages that helps the parents to understand, help the population to understand it's not a stigma, destigmatize it. And that's one part of the work I've been doing a lot. And I think the other part of the work is actually outside of Asian community, is to advocate, is to voice your concern. Right now, like the setting I'm working right now, I work at a addiction treatment center here in Southern California. I'm the only Asian person here, whether it's staff or client, I'm the only Asian here. So everyone around me is not Asian at all. So sometimes, people will ask me questions out of curiosity. And I know the majority of them, they ask me questions with good intention. But the way they ask their questions or the way they make some comments might be a little bit inappropriate. So my way of kind of like support my community in the way is that I usually just be very, very upfront with them. I tell them, hey, I understand the reason why you asked that question is this and that, but I'm gonna let you know that I might not feel offended by the question you ask. But if you ask that question somewhere else, you might offend people. There are better ways, there are more appropriate ways to ask those questions. So I usually just point it out to my non-Asian colleagues or clients. And a lot of them, they're very receptive because they probably would never had that interaction with other people, with Asian people in the past, or even people point out to them, hey, this is not appropriate. They probably don't have that awareness at all. So by giving that example, a lot of them, they actually really appreciate it. They're like, yeah, thank you so much. And now next time we'll be more mindful of it. So I think, with a bigger umbrella, this is kind of like what I do to support what I've been doing, and then definitely what I'll be continue to do to support Asian communities.
That's great. I think we run into that kind of questions or curiosity every time. Just the need to learn a way to respond to have everyone understand better. So, Lisette, do you want to take the last about maybe 3 minutes to tell us what you have done? It sounds like you have done a lot already. Maybe create a lot of projects for us as well. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah, mindful of time, I'll try to keep it shorter.
Thank you.
But yeah, I agree with Luna and Nicholas, and I love the passion that's coming from this talk. I think solidarity is very important because for Asian Pacific Islander Desi communities and all communities of color. It takes a collective effort to make the change. And so at the Chicago School, I am a founder and the president of Asian Pacific Student Collective, or APSC. And we do educate on social issues. We create a sense of belonging and support for students and alumni, as well as promote diversity within these APIDA cultures. And so internationally, I would like to deliver psychoeducational workshops on mental health, such as how poverty can impact mental health. I think that's needed in like provinces or villages, as well as partner with hospitals in the cities to do that. Because like Luna was saying, you know, oftentimes like, you know, hallucinations, delusions from like dementia, for instance, is mistaken as this person is crazy, which ultimately ostracizes or marginalizes that person from the community. And so I hope that there'll be more of that. And I hope coming from this talk, people will kind of consider that, because I think there really is a need for not just the Philippines, but just countries to have more psychoeducational workshops and talks like this. So.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. I'm just looking at the time. We have about like 12 minutes to go, unless the panelists still has something like you want to add or you want to comment. And I want to open up to the audience. You can just simply unmute yourself and tell us a little bit more about you and how you feel. How anyone wants to volunteer?
I have something I'd like to actually share, you know, in
Sure,
response
Nicholas,
to
go ahead.
Luna, actually. And Luna actually shared a really good experience that I think it really resonates with me, especially with her talk about how some clients might say things that are not necessarily politically correct sometimes. And that in a previous life, I worked as an HR business partner for a manufacturing company, and that is my background. And in that kind of environment, you have to expect that some people are not going to be too, you know, focused on, you know, being politically correct in an environment where it's very rough and tumble all the time. And it's no fault of their own. And again, like Luna's point, you know, like I don't want to hold it out of anger or anything like that. You know, it's mainly to do with sometimes people just come from different backgrounds and they may not be as informed about things. And it's something that I think personally is one of the biggest things I really wanted to change during my time as an Asian American. At least the impact I wanted to impart on the organization I was with was really helping to actually shape this organization to be a much more culturally aware organization, you know, and talking about, you know, being agents of change, you know, I mean, we're all agents of change here, aren't we? You know, so one of the things that I was really, really big on was actually initiating a kind of an HR policy of actually celebrating cultural holidays, basically, you know, having celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, African American Heritage Month, Asian API Heritage Month, things like that, you know. And I would then draw upon like a diverse group of people from the company just to create the events, to have a committee, just design these events by committee, basically. And I think, again, to your point, I think it's going to be it takes solidarity. It takes a group effort to really overcome this. You can't just, you know, go at it alone and, you know, expect that, you know, you're going to affect change without actually trying to, you know, change the hearts and minds of people around you. And I think, you know, approaching it from a much more, I think in my point of view, a much more softer tone, but with firmness and with good intentions is, you know, the way that I personally believe was, you know, the best way to actually affect that kind of change.
Exactly. Yeah. I also been asked a lot of questions since I was a student the first day of being a student in the United States. So, but I always like to take that as a chance for me to share my cultural, my experience with the person who is asking that question, because it's out of like, even though sometimes it's not very appropriate, but it's also curiosity, and I feel like so honored that someone wants to know me a bit more, but try to, in my answer, try to navigate into the positive way, and also maybe just hinted it's another Asian culture, like hinted that maybe it's another way, there's another way to ask that question. I'm pretty sure the person who asked that question next time when he asks something else, that way will be in a different way. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. Anyone else wants to comment? We have about 8 minutes. I see the chat box has been very active. Thank you so much for sharing your heritage and your thoughts with us. yeah, if you had the chance to read. Anyone wants to make a comment?
I see a lot of comments about, I see Gunjan over here is talking a lot about international student anxiety, and that is a very real anxiety. I will say that. Given the events of last year and the last 4 years, you know, it was a very real anxiety. So I definitely commiserate with you there on that front in terms of that anxiety. But you know, if you have any comments, I'd like to hear it.
So sure, you know, I did my master's in health admin from the University of Scranton, and I was on H4 visa. And I can more than understand the anxieties of students on F1 and H4 visa, because the tuition in the US costs a fortune in Indian currency, okay?
Kanjan, you're, I think maybe your
H4, you
connection
don't
is not very
qualify
stable.
for federal loans, like
Your
borrow loans on their
connection is
own.
not
I
very
can understand.
stable. Yeah. Can you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I typed my comments in the chat.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, please do so. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Gajan.
Yeah, thanks, Gajan. Any other one want to comment anything?
Well, Cindy, I just wanted to say that this, I mean,
Go
it
ahead.
feels to me like we need to have more of these conversations. I mean, you know, sometimes when we have these type of conversations, it's sort of like there's a slow to warm up period to talk a little bit about it. Then we start getting into really the foundation of the conversation. And I hope, just like I think all of you, Nicholas and Luna and Lucette, have mentioned, that hopefully that we can continue to have these conversations, whether it's in the student space, whether it's open like this to anybody, invitations, those type of things, because I think this is really what's needed for that solidarity, healing, moving forward, and for us to give back to our communities. I think this is, for me at least, as faculty and as someone who's part of the communities, just very encouraging. I feel, you know, I don't know, I feel like, well, can't hug anybody right now, but feel very encouraged. And with everyone who's come. Oh, Grace said, can we make this a series? Okay.
Yay. I see Ganjan's comments, like when she couldn't, the internet was not very stable. She said that I feel TCSPP can offer more resources for public speaking practice for students like us. Yeah, I'm not a public speaker either. And I feel the teachers, careers, counselors, writing center professors can have more empathy for first generation immigrants and international students. That's a very good suggestion. Maybe, Ganjan, we can have another discussion, another panel, and to work with all the professionals and resources, supporters and student supports at TCSPP. Definitely another group, like international student in general, is a whole different group. And definitely they need a lot of support. Like right now we are open in fall 2021. It's very exciting news for international students, but a lot of work. I'm just composing emails to different group of students about how to travel. You cannot travel if you're from certain countries, and how you're quarantined in a third country before you can enter, and a COVID test and everything. So yeah, that's a whole different group that we can, yeah, I'm very happy to have another session to discuss about that. Yeah, Dr. Press, you want to say something? Sorry, before we go.
No.
Okay.
There's a lot of next steps here in the
yes,
chat.
definitely.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and also like Nicholas and Lucette, you have mentioned some like your support you have done for the community, and I can see a lot of my brain of the faculty here maybe start to think about grant applications and to work on those projects to support that community. Please, like I look forward to working with every one of you, and look out for the grant announcements.
Cindy, sorry,
yes.
Cindy. Olivia asked if there's a collective, an Asian Pacific student collective for DC.
I don't think so. At least I'm not aware of, but I'm 100% sure that Lucette is welcoming everyone. So maybe Lucette, you want to change your organization's name to TCSPP?
Can we have the panelists put their like contact information? I don't know if there's.
Yeah. Lucette, do you think you can write down Olivia's name and then maybe we can reach out and see if we can get connected with those students in DC or in maybe all other campuses?
Absolutely.
so
And
much.
I can also provide the APSC
Yeah.
email because we have students from other campuses. I know there's one from DC. So we're welcoming and inclusive to everyone.
Yeah, so yeah, Olivia, you can just reach out to Lucette afterwards. I'm pretty sure that we can get connected. Before I let everyone go, thank you so much. And I will just put it on the screen. On May 4th, there's another event that Dr. Perez, Trish, is going to interview Trudy Tu. Hopefully I pronounced it correctly. And she's she identifies herself as an Asian American, and she's also an actress and writer and producer. You can, if you type her name in Google, you will see what she has done in her products. And she is also, besides acting and writing, she has been very active to support this Asian community as well. So we're going to have an interview. And these Dr. Perez and Trudy are schoolmate from Northwestern University.
Yes.
How many years ago? I don't want to say.
Well, no, we met when we were 18. Let's just let's just say that.
Okay, so you can tell that they have a lot to say during the interview. And another event for all the students. We just made an announcement yesterday that there is going to be a cultural heritage short story contest that Megan Marshall has worked with me closely on this project, and we're open to all students. We welcome every one of you to share your cultural story with us, so we get to know each other. We're going to make a storybook and send back to all students to review, to vote, have some award for sure. And so I just look forward to receive all your stories. Anything last minute? Anything?
The link, Megan put the link for the storybook.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So if no comments for now, that's it for today. Thank you so much. And I just I'm so amazed that I found out. I learned a lot about each one of you, and I didn't know that there's so many people who have a Filipino background. Excuse me. Thank you so much, and definitely we will continue this effort, and there will be series of events in May as well, and continue our effort. So thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I cannot finish this. Everyone.
Cindy, do we stay too, or do we go?
No, we're done.
Okay.
And we will get connected later on. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. Have a great one.